Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today we're exploring healing beyond traditional medicine with Beatrice Anduze-Faris, Dr. B, whose journey from French medical pharmaceuticals to America's trauma recovery demonstrates how our most challenging experience can become the foundation for helping others transform their lives. Welcome, Dr. B. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Anisha. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So, tell us more about your journey from France to the US. You were working there, you were there in the pharmaceutical industry for 20 years, and now you are helping people with trauma and you have started your own business. Tell us more about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, technically, I started in Canada because I was born in Canada to French parents, not French Canadian, but French and Canadian. I ended up growing up in Paris and going through medical school. And after many years working at the hospital and holding hands with HIV and AIDS patients and dying patients, at some point it was time for me to move on to something else. And I chose to join the pharmaceutical industry for many reasons that were quite personal and actually connected to my own past traumatic experiences. So I can explain that later. But long story short, I had a long career in the industry, which led me to come back to North America and come to the US, be very successful in my career, and yet still unfulfilled and feeling a little bit miserable. And I was always searching for other things to do on the side, other modalities that would both help me and allow me to help other people. And at some point, I got into the adventure of shiatsu training. I did pretty much 2 or 3 years of shiatsu training. That brought a lot of stability in my life. It changed the way I looked at food as well. My whole food belief system changed from there on. And as I discovered microbiotics and the 5 elements and all that. And then later on, I think a pivotal point in where I am now. There's many. I mean, you meet a lot of people throughout your adventures, and they are defining moments. The one defining moment was a friend of mine who I hired to be my coach for business purposes. It ended up bringing me not only value for business, but also for my career, but also for personal reasons. And he was practicing emotional freedom techniques. And I had heard about emotional or EFT, emotional freedom technique or tapping, from many different people beforehand, but never really explored that. As I was doing tapping with him, it was exhausting. It was digging up a number of deep emotions, and I could see the effect it had on me in terms of calming me down in stressful situations, being able to manage my own leadership style at work differently. And I was very intrigued. I was like, there's something real in there. There's something that's going on, and I don't know why. I don't know why tapping on your own face, this silly, stupid thing, works, but it works. And so I kept that on the back burner, so to speak. I knew this could be my way out of trauma, and I got scared. So as I continued in my career and did not further explore EFT, years passed, maybe 7, 8 years, and my own traumatic experiences just took me by the throat and didn't want to let me go. And so eventually I was like, okay, how do I find someone I can trust that can help me deal with this and help me through EFT? And I looked and looked and I couldn't find anyone. I was looking at websites and coaches on YouTube and couldn't find anything. Eventually I was like, maybe I just need to learn it. And so I eventually found the EFT universe and Dawson Church, who's a PhD who has conducted clinical trials on EFT. And I'm science-based, so it was very grounding for me. And I joined the EFT universe and became certified with them. Through that, I actually was able to fully clear a significant number of traumatic experiences from my past. And as I got out of the tunnel, it really enabled me to find my voice and start helping people meaningfully. I could help people before, but now it was really meaningful. And so that's how I came up with this. And I got let go at the end of 2023. Very happy to be out finally of the corporate world and starting this business of life transformation coaching and EFT.
Amazing. That is such a journey. Wow. So from Canada to France, back to US. Tell us what it was like to have immigrant parents and what was your early life like? Like What did that entail in terms of how you were raised, in terms of schooling, in terms of you wanting to have a successful career? What did that look like?
Yeah, I like to think about my parents as nomads at the time. So they both met in Paris as architectural students. They were students in School of Architecture. At the time, architecture was really high in Canada and particularly in Quebec and Laval University. And so these young couples that were all drawing and scratching on paper at the time were looking at each other and saying, hey, maybe we should all go to Quebec and just get on the adventure. You know, it was the 60s. It was a time of, hippie moments where people were thinking we're free to do whatever we want. And so they all decided to go, except that at the last minute, everyone bailed out except my parents. And so they basically moved knowing they were pregnant with me. And they moved with like the equivalent of $200 in pocket at the time, probably the equivalent of $2,000 now. And they moved to Quebec. I was born there. 2 years later, they left for Switzerland. A couple years after that, they moved back to Paris. And then inside Paris, I probably moved like 20 times. I'm not kidding you, over the years. I think by the time I was 40, I had counted 20 moves in my whole life. So
Wow.
once every 2 years. So it just gives you a sense of home is where you are. It's not where you are in this moment. It's not the house that you get attached to, because there's no way you can continue surviving if you get attached to any one of these apartments.
Yes.
And yeah, the philosophy was really adaptability.
Mhm.
What you have in this moment, and you do your best with what you have in this moment. So
Absolutely.
that's what I retain from it. I think the ultimate nomadic thing my dad did is pass when I was 10 years old overnight without
Mhm.
any heads up, right? And that was also a very defining moment, because in that moment, I basically thought my first thought was that of fear. What's going to happen to us?
Yeah.
Like this. I've known this whole life with all the changes happening, but I've known this whole life with two parents and at the time a little brother. And suddenly that night, I can tell you, November 23rd, 1977 was a Tuesday. You remember all these little details. But in that moment, I had that fear, that question, what is going to happen to us? And then there was this decision I made, which was I'm going to survive and I'm going to make it that my mom and my brother will be fine. In other words, I took on the task on my shoulders to keep everyone safe and happy. And eventually that's what I did.
Yeah. It's a huge responsibility for a 10-year-old, and for you to think at that time and make that sort of decision is like different level of maturity.
Yeah, it's like you jump from childhood to almost motherhood, I want to say, because my mom started working, multiple shifts. My brother was a year and a half old. So basically, I took on to continue my own job as a student at school, but also take on even more chores at the house
Yeah.
and take care of my brother for
Yeah.
most part. So I kind of skipped teenage years in that moment, and that I had to catch up with that a little later in my
Yeah.
life.
Yes. So how did those moments define your journey into, like, when you were having your trauma healing, and when you went into the trauma healing journey, how did those moments affect you later on?
So it's interesting because when it comes to trauma, and I only mentioned one of the big things, you have to survive, and that's the main job of your primitive brain, is to keep surviving. And
Yeah.
so I switched on this resilience button, right? And what that means is basically you put that trauma on the side or under the rug or in the basement, and you close the door and you say, I'll be fine no matter what.
Yeah.
So that gives you, and in my case, it gave me a lot of energy, a lot of momentum to move forward, always move forward, be an
Yeah.
agent of change instead of being a victim of change, and pushing through, right? Having this life force to just go further above and out. The challenge when we do that is that we do deny this part of us that has been hurt. I didn't grieve normally. I didn't grieve like I should have as a child, losing her dad, for probably another 20 years. Because in that moment, my mom didn't have the resources, or we didn't have the education at the time to think about, hey, a child has lost their dad. They need therapy, they need support, they need community to express what happened. So you just bottle it up, and you live your life as well as you can. And so that's what I did. And what happens then is that it catches up with you, but it catches up with you much later.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. That's one of the things I teach is trauma is not going to get better if you don't overcome it. It's going to get worse. And sometimes it gets worse, not 5 years later, but sometimes 40 years later. And yeah, and so that's really one of the key teaching point that I like to share with people now is if you have had that type of trauma, and a lot of people have in their lives, and I will add, even if it's not big T trauma, some small T traumas have very bad effects on us on a daily basis. If you don't address it, you can keep ignoring for a long, long time, but it's not going to forget you, and it's going to come back with a revenge. So it took me a while after that to really overcome that trauma. And I'm not talking just in this case of my dad, because I fixed that a little later, like maybe when I was in my early 40s or early 30s maybe. But yeah, it doesn't go away. You have to do something about it. And then if you don't have enough insights, if you don't get enough information from how that works, then you don't know what to do. So I was at that stage a few years back. I was like all this past trauma was sticking me by the throat, and I was clueless as to what to do. Okay, yes, I know meditation, I know yoga, I know Qigong, I've practiced shiatsu, I've done therapy. Yes, I know all that, but it doesn't get you through the tunnel. It's not enough. And what I like to tell people is maybe it's not EFT for you. I found EFT, it was really a lifeline for me. But if it doesn't work for you, there's something else that will. So you have to keep looking. You have to search. Keep on your own adventure, on your own path.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is very heavy and a lot to process. So definitely, people need to work with you and people like you who are here to help and to coach and help us deal with life, I suppose. So you worked in traditional medicine. What aspects of that felt limiting to you?
So I went into medicine because I really wanted to help people. And I also wanted to really understand how the body works, body and mind. And I went through, so I eventually did not specialize. And I like to explain why, because there's a lot of push in the medical schools to specialize and do, do 5 years of internship and become like a surgeon or aesthetic surgeon or some kind of specialty that will get you a lot of wealth over time. But every time I was exploring a specialty, I felt like it was getting me into a narrow focus that was not holistic enough. It was not giving me how all of this works. So going through medical school was great because it gave me a huge amount of insight as to how it works. But every time I was trying to think about, okay, how about I become, my first thought was being a surgeon and do liver surgery. I just loved the liver. I think the organ is absolutely phenomenal. And surgery I had a chance to go into a operating room quite early in my medical studies, and it just blew my mind. I had an epiphany, and I really wanted to do that. But then I was looking at the people I was looking up to, those professors of university and my mentors, and I was like, they have spent their entire life not only talking about the liver, but talking about one disease in the liver. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 40 years of my life and then come back and look back and say, I've only looked at this.
Yeah.
So I looked at this, I looked at psychiatry, and the same thing happened in my mind. And eventually I was like, I cannot specialize because it goes against my values of holisticness, of looking across, looking at how things interconnect with each other.
Yeah.
And actually, I think now, after all these years, I know more about the holistic aspect of the human body by not remembering my medical studies, but by exploring EFT and how neuroscience and neuroplasticity, how the brain works. and how the brain works very intimately connected to the body. So I'll share with you one key insight I learned when I was in shiatsu school. And as an MD, I resisted that learning so much. The first thing I heard was our emotions are stored in our fascia.
Wow.
And I was like, hold on a second. No, I cannot take this. This doesn't work for me. This is against everything I learned. But then I experienced it. And when you experience it, it shouts truth much more than anything else, much more than any textbook. And, you know, when people go to a massage and you get some deep tissue massage and suddenly you have some emotions, some memories that come up, some emotions, and people cry on the table, that's what we're talking about. We have stored emotions in our fascia and we can release it through specific massage or energy healing. So that fascinated me. That's a different approach. So I have absolutely no regret in having gone to medical school because I needed this key fundamental learning of how things work, at least how science sees how it works today.
Yes.
And I needed that to transcend it basically and do something else after that.
Amazing. So tell us how you define trauma from a medical and a psychological perspective.
So the way I define trauma, it's not my way of defining trauma, but when I went through EFT, actually that definition helped me extremely. And you know, Gabor Mate says it's not what happened to you, is how you perceive what happened to you and how you basically store that energy in your body. The trauma itself, as egregious event in your life has been, whether it's violence or it's earthquake or it's major surgery or having been bullied repetitively in school, it's not the event itself that really matters. It's how you manage in the moment. So trauma starts when first you get overwhelmed in your own coping capacity in that moment. And that's why a lot of big T trauma happens in early childhood, particularly before 6 years old, because we're not verbal at that time yet. And so we basically, you know, we say kids as sponges, right? We basically absorb what's happening. And we don't have a huge capacity at that level because we cannot reason about it. We just feel it. It just comes to us. So when we are overwhelmed with that capacity, we feel like there's nothing we can do. There's no more fight or flight, which could be a very healthy way of managing, but a child of that age cannot fight or flight. So we freeze. That's the first thing. The second thing is the unexpectedness. So, for example, in child sexual abuse, which also happened to me, one thing that is crucial is you're expecting a parent or a grandparent to be there for you, for your safety, to feed you, to keep you safe. And when that person starts hurting you, it's not quite clear what that means, but it's unexpected for sure. And you, even if you're nonverbal, you still understand some kind of right or wrong, and you're like, it's wrong, and you don't know why it still happened. There's unexpectedness, being overwhelmed, nowhere to escape, nowhere to go, so we freeze. And I'll tell you why it has been so defining for me to learn about this. And it's in my own experience that happened. So you have unexpectedness, powerlessness, because your capacity to absorb this is overwhelmed. And then the first one is really, it's a threat. It's a threat to your own survival.
Yeah.
And what's important to understand there is that threat doesn't have to be real to be a threat, to be perceived by the brain as a threat. And then the last piece is the unexpectedness. I think I told you about that. The fourth component is being isolated. So as I go back to my childhood experience when I lost my dad, it was unexpected. It was overnight, in middle of the night. There was no disease, no hospital stays, nothing to preclude this. So that was unexpected. I felt isolated, although my mom was there and friends of my mom were there. But my own experience was I was sitting on this chair, on this armchair, wondering what was going on in my life and feeling like on a little isolated island. And even if people would be talking to me, it just would go through me. And it was like, there's no one else that's living this right now. I'm the only one on this little island. Powerlessness, because there was nothing I could do in that moment. My dad's body was on the next room next door, and there was nothing I could do about it. And the threat to my survival is that moment when my mom told me about him passing, and I felt like this huge fear about uncertainty of the future. So these four together are really the perfect recipe for trauma that will persist over time if nothing is done. And you can see now, as if any one of these four is handled in a powerful way, it can actually help the person in the moment. And the isolation, for example, means bringing a child into a place where they can hear others living through the same thing. Going to a non-for-profit for grieving, for example, can help tremendously, because then they don't feel alone anymore. And then they can start building their capacity of coping.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you so much again for all that information and sharing this with us. So, tell us a little more about the Trauma Sherpa. How did that come to being? How did you come up with the name, and what it is that you do?
Yes. So I have explored through shiatsu, and more recently with a really nice person who's based in the UK, who's a therapist that has been working with the five elements for a long time. I've been exploring the five energies or five elements of traditional Chinese medicine. It's traditional Chinese philosophy. This has been around for thousands of years and has been pressure tested and used by governments over the years. Energies. So the five elements are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And I've done a little assessment with this person, Nick, and I have a lot of earth energy. My major energy is earth. So earth is nurturing, is the ground for growth. It feeds humans, right? It's grounding by definition. It's where you can build the foundation. It's the foundation for buildings. So it's usually a lot of people who go into healthcare have earth energy. And so I've always used metaphors like the path, or being on an adventure and finding your path or your paths in front of you. And the image of a mountain that you climb, whether it's Mount Fuji in Japan or Everest, we know that there's one summit, and there's so many different ways of going to that summit. There's your own path. In fact, even if hundreds of people would climb the same mountain, none of them will take the exact same path, will step on the exact same place as anyone else. So the Sherpa, the concept of the Sherpa is, it's a way of, I'm holding your hand, I'm showing you the way, but you have to take the steps. I'm not doing the work for you. I know there is multiple paths, and I can carry a little bit of your load to help you out. But once you find that path, at some point you can let go of my hand. So I'm really envisioning this as you come together with a coach, they help you, and then you can part. I don't want to be there and be like a support system for people for a long, long time.
Right.
But that's how I've experienced it with my clients as well. The Trauma Sherpa came later in my branding, but it came through that real inner experience of taking a step forward and finding paths and helping others find their own.
I love that. I really love the analogy and how you explained it. So you have a program called the Dream Builder.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and how it helps trauma survivors.
Yes. Dream building is from the Brave Thinking Institute. I stumbled across them about 2 years ago, and it was at the time when I had just helped a friend of mine, and at some point she looked at me and she said, I would really love if you could coach me. And I thought, yes, I am now a certified EFT practitioner. I really don't have a coaching framework. Like, I can come up with something for you, but I don't have a coaching framework. And literally 2 days later, I stumbled across the Brave Thinking Institute, and I may have sent that question to the universe, what can I do to become a coach? And I got this answer so clearly in front of me, I signed up right away. And I've learned so much from Mary Morrissey and the Brave Thinking Institute and her whole family. And I'm so grateful for those learnings. It has helped me tremendously set up my own business. And it has given me this very reliable, robust framework for life transformation using manifestation and a sort of second language of the universe. And it's repeatable, and you could do that for a small, tiny dream, and you can do it for a very big dream, and you can help people tremendously. The way it can help people with trauma is how I see it anyway, is I integrate EFT as part of the program because I know by experience that if you don't clear those big stuff, that
Mhm.
baggage, then yes, you can have some nice positive statements about life and manifesting your life and being grateful and repeating this over and over. But it might not be enough if you have parts of you locked in a basement and banging at the door every day.
Yes.
Right. So we need to clean the closet. So I help my clients through DreamBuilder, but also by integrating EFT as part of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, if somebody wants to work with you, what would be the best way to reach you? And tell us about any upcoming programs you have or
Yeah.
anything that you're releasing. Let us know all about it.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to do is check out the website, TheTraumaSherpa.com, where you will see that first you can sign up for a free session with me, 30 minutes to just look at what your needs are, what you would really want to do, and whether I can help, whether this could be a good fit. I'm not pretending to be a good fit for everybody on the planet, but I encourage people, though, to attend some of my workshops that I conduct almost every week throughout the year, and I do multiple workshops. I do a workshop on vision, which comes from DreamBuilder, and it gives you the first few steps of dream building, creating clarity and better understanding what you would really love in your life so that you can take the next step. That vision workshop can be followed with a journaling workshop that helps you create your life by design day by day. And I have another workshop that is a little bit more intellectual, focusing on trauma itself and understanding how does that work. That's how we talk about what trauma is. I call that the kintsugi path to transformation, because kintsugi is this wonderful Japanese art of joinery with gold. When you have a broken vase and you repair it with visible repair, that becomes more beautiful than the previous state of the vase. So that's the third workshop. And I have another fourth workshop around grounding practices like meditation and breathing and tapping, where we explore how you can build up your own rituals day to day, rituals that you're and habits that you're actually going to do and that are actually going to help you. And they cost zero money because you do it at home and it takes only a few minutes a day. So these four workshops are a good way to see me and see how I function and how I express myself and how I interact with people. I'm not, pretending that just with half an hour of conversation with me, you're going to suddenly want to work with me. So these workshops are really a nice way to understand whether it could be a good fit, and then we can talk. And then coming up on June 21st, I will lead for the first time an in-person retreat for a full day in Lambertville. It's called the Reset and Reconnect Retreat, and I've been advertising on my social media. It's on my website at TheTraumaSherpa.com/events. So I invite everybody to check it out and sign up.
Perfect. Thank you again for all this information. Thank you for opening up and sharing, you know, personal parts of your life and giving us insight on the work you do. With all your experience so far in the medical field, internationally, what would be your advice for, someone starting their business, like, someone who's really moved from another country and who's starting their life afresh, or somebody who's interested in starting their own business? What would be a few nuggets that you can share so they can take it with them to start their life?
Yeah, thank you, Anisha. So I have moved a number of times in my life, and I have gone on this adventure of entrepreneurship more recently in my life. For many, many years, if you had asked me, I would have said, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know how to run a business. I have no clue. And at the same time, I was a successful vice president in a big pharma company and having like 150 people reporting to me. So there's a little bit of disconnect here. And the disconnect is it's our own self-talk, is how we listen to our own self around our ability to do something or not to do something. So I think the first thing to do, my first recommendation is believe that you can do it. And if you can't believe that you can do it, believe that I believe you can do it.
I love that.
And the second recommendation is watch the people that have done it. Talk to them, explore, be curious, ask questions. And, you know, my journey started a long, long time ago. I had ideas like this probably since my son was born, so probably like 16 years ago, 17 years ago. And it took me all that time to get to this point, but I could have gone much faster if I had listened to a number of people earlier on in my life. Mary Morrissey is one of them, for sure, life manifestation. Another one is actually Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. They're doing their summit. Actually, these days, they just started yesterday live. And I started doing this with them probably 3 years ago. They were talking about all these things that are possible if you really want them. And I remember thinking, whoa, is this really possible? I had all these but in my heads, you know, but I can't do this, but I don't have the time, but but I'm not an entrepreneur, you know? And they have shifted my mind on this. So that, you know, the more you can listen to people that will encourage you, the better. And then, you know, the best thing you can do as well is envision that you can do it. Envision yourself already doing it.
Yes.
And then take one step at a time into that direction. And in a way, that's what I did. I created my LLC while I was still working. You know, I started the whole business structure and everything. But eventually, you can accelerate things with the right coach, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Finding your own tribe and listening to people who have walked the path is so essential.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your expertise, and your experience. We totally appreciate it. For all our listeners, all the information to get in touch with Beatrice will be in the show notes. And if you are local in New Jersey, please sign up for her retreat.
Thank you so much, Anisha. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. As we conclude our powerful conversation with Beatrice, remember that trauma does not need to define your future. If you'd like to share your healing approach through a digital platform, I'd love to help create a website that clearly communicates your mission through custom Squarespace or WordPress websites. This is Anisha Jennings reminding you that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest gifts to the world. Until next time.